Ashley. I'm the DMAT Hall Senator.
I'm Murphy. I'm actually a Doisy Senator, but I'm also a disgruntled student.
I'm Courtney Anvender. I'm an Arts and Sciences Senator.
I'm Katie Becker. I'm a commuter senator. I got off campus a while ago.
Everyone, I'm Paul. I'm an Arts and Sciences Senator.
Awesome. Thank you guys for coming. I guess if we just want to go around the room, first probably state your name, your college, where you're living currently, so, just to get a rough.
I'm Ryan Kelly from Parks College, and currently live in Grand Forest. And I also was going to start a Facebook group to collect interest on the issue.
My name is Mike Putnam. I also started the other Facebook group too. We work together. SLU Housing Fiasco. I'm a junior. I actually got into the place I wanted, but I'm here on principle, so.
I'm Eric Byrne. I'm from Parks, also a junior. I currently live in Grand Forest, and I'm also a grad principal.
Molly Moore, junior, Doisy, lived in the village, and now have to live in the law.
I'm Catlin, a junior, and I live in Marquette West through luck and lots of persuasion. I was able to squat last week.
I'm Maggie. I'm a junior. I'm in Marquette West.
My name is Heather. I'm a junior. I'm going to school, and right now I live in the village, but next year I will be living
I'm Caitlin Bruni. I'm a sophomore, and I live in the village, and I'm living off campus next year.
I'm Drew Lathers. I'm a sophomore. I'm fully off campus next year.
Conrad Saini, I'm a senior. I'm the Marketing Tower Senator, and I came here to listen to everyone's concerns about housing.
I'm Sam James. I'm a sophomore. Currently in school business.
Pat Etor, sophomore, living in Fuse, not really sure when we're living this year yet.
Tom Doherty, live in Fuse, being forced to live in Fuse again next year.
Michael Trio, Fuse resident for 2 years, live in room 523, will live in room 519 next year.
Chris Burnett, sophomore, I live in Grand Forest right now. I'm being forced to the flats next semester.
I'm Megan Lovato, junior, Arts and Sciences, and I live in Grand Forest now, but I'm moving home because of the housing fiasco.
My name is Priyanka Reddy. I am a sophomore. I'm in the College of Arts and Sciences. I currently live in Fuse, and I have to go off campus for next year.
My name is Lizzie Burns. I'm a sophomore in the College of Arts and Sciences. I live in Fuse now, and I'm going to be living off campus next year.
I'm Lena. I'm the Reinert Senator, and I'm just here to hear everyone else's stuff.
Okay, awesome. Thank you all. We're just doing introductions, so if you guys can introduce yourselves.
I'm Amy. I'm in the business school. I live in DMAT right now, and I actually don't know where I'm living next year because of everything that's going on. So yeah.
I'm Elena. I'm in Arts and Sciences. I'm
And we have some other associates in the back. Introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Kat. I'm from UDUS, and we'll be quietly taking care of this one.
I'm Kelly. I'm also from the UDUS, and you can go this alone. So it's fine.
I'm Allison. I'm also from the UDUS, but I'm also here just to hear everyone's concerns.
I'm Steve. I'm from SLU-TV. We're doing this live.
Matt, SLU-TV. Smile.
Okay. Well, I'd first like to thank you all for coming, to voice your concerns. I know, hearing from a lot of you, there are, but I'd like to get more first-hand experience in a more professional setting. So, I guess if you just raise your hand, I'll give you a call and you can say what your issue is.
I think we should start with the actual housing appointment times. I think a lot of people were kind of thrown off by that. And the order that was taken in. I guess there are a few instances where I know people had been transfer students or living off campus for the entire freshman and sophomore year with lower GPAs than my group, but were in front of us, and there were also students that had the same amount of semesters on campus with higher GPAs that were behind us. So I know it goes both ways. So kind of like we should probably figure out how they did that, since Alvin was saying that it was the semesters on campus, the GPA, that kind of stuff. That was factored into it, and it didn't seem like it at all.
Do you guys?
I have a response to how that happened. So the way it worked is Brian actually just got out of a meeting with Dr. Kemp Porterfield and Scott Smith of administration. And what happened was piggybacking. So as you know, all the sophomores had to be, and you news back there, this is like me doing my own research, so I'm totally subject to fact checking, but this seems to be what happened.
We just write
So,
things down blindly.
No, so what's going to happen is that all sophomores had to be accounted for on campus.
Right.
So entire all sophomore groups were accommodated for. And then it was said that starting 11-16, all upperclassmen housing appointments would start, starting with seniors and then you unfortunate juniors. Well, what happened though is there was a hybrid group of sophomores and juniors, where incoming sophomores signed up with juniors, and that whole group got housing appointment time before the top seniors.
Yeah.
But even within just the junior group.
Okay, so I'm just saying that at least that was one issue where the housing appointment times.
That was a big issue.
They did not stick to the set aside. They said the average number of semesters on campus was the most important factor. After sophomores were accommodated for, that was not met with, as reserved upperclassmen spaces were given to sophomores, the yellow spots, and to juniors and the seniors. So that's my response to that.
I just had a question for you or anyone else who knows, but do you know the number of people with housing appointments that opted out of the housing contract? After this
I do not have a number. Currently,
We're two of them.
Yeah.
So three, at least three.
Yeah, we actually just sent out an email about an hour ago. People who signed up for the class and signed the contract that day, but were not aware that it was a 12-month lease and were not told that your housing scholarship will not apply. That has now become full disclosure, so now we're all aware of that, and so they said by 5 o'clock tomorrow, you can email Housing and Res Life and make the subject urgent flats.
So people sign up for the flats not knowing that there was no scholarship and not knowing that there was no.
That it was 12 months. And so they said you can change that. You can change that much, and you get out of the addendum at the flats, but you do not. That doesn't exempt you from your housing contract with SLU in general.
Oh, so you have to pick another place.
You put on a waiting
You
list.
put on a waiting list, and I will meet us tomorrow morning to figure out what the difference is between those things.
Did you have
That was.
The thing that we were told is that we were told if we didn't pull out of our housing contract day of when we signed up, like when we had our appointment, like 5:30 a.m. in the afternoon on Saturday, that we would be charged our $250 deposit plus the lowest housing rate on campus for a semester that we wouldn't even be living on campus. Like we'd be charged $2,000 plus whatever rent we were paying wherever we were living. And when we heard that, we were like, absolutely not, let me out of this right now.
I can't speak for it, but I'm sure that's not how it is supposed to be.
Well, that's literally what
That's
we
what they said.
went to like the canceling contract.
Who did you talk to?
The lady, there was a table with like a cancel your contract, and I made sure, I was like, well, if I could cancel it today, like what would happen? And she said you could get all your money back and everything like that. But then I asked her, well, what if I cancel it tomorrow or next week? She said then you would lose your deposit and you would have to pay the minimum amount of housing per semester per semester.
David, do you know who, I don't mean to speak out of turn, do you know who works the tables? Is it students or is
No,
it?
it was the housing,
it was the
housing
housing
worker. It was a woman who worked.
Her name's like
One of the cancellation people was Michelle Minson, the senior assignments coordinator. So basically, she knows. I believe the other lady was the actual administrator for the computer portion.
I think that something should be established to communicate to all people who are signed up for the flats, because I was not aware of this 5 p.m. deadline, and I think that that's just tomorrow. Something needs to be sent out.
That email literally was sent out right before the housing and res life office closed at 5. So we sprinted over there and we're like, how do we get out of this? And that's, if you check your email, everyone who signed up for the flats should have gotten that. I'll post it on the group though. And also thank you for starting, because we needed a forum.
I'm sure, like, after this meeting, I can send something to all the residential centers, and you guys have, you have your lister, right?
Josh has it.
Okay. Well, I don't know, but Cameron, you got it. So we'll be able to send it out.
I think one of the things that I was most frustrated with, aside from the idea of seniority, that, you know, the seniors that I know, Mike and Brian, you know, we're really involved on campus. We're not just students, we participate, we're leaders of our clubs. We really, you know, we work here on campus, and to be dismissed as we can't pick, not only can we not pick where we'd like to live first, but the places that were left when I went to sign up were 12-month contracts, which I cannot afford. I'm not from around here. And living in a quad with 3 sophomores and me as a 22-year-old woman living with, I would like to choose who I would like to live near and where my friends are in relation to me. And also the only other place that was left was Marguerite, and I don't have desire to live in the dorms. But aside from that, I had no idea that our housing scholarship did not apply at the flats. And I think that idea that SLU hid that from us on purpose, or because on the website I looked and looked, there's no spot on the website that says your housing scholarship doesn't apply, and I think it was very sneaky.
On the note of there being no scholarship for the flats, I'm curious if anyone would know why that is, since it's being treated almost as an official dorm.
From what I've heard, because it is not university-owned housing, it's university-operated. Since it is operated, it's owned by that company, and blanking on the name, and that's why it doesn't apply. Because the housing scholarship is for university housing. It's a language issue, I believe.
Well, I just want to add something. The reason why they decided to add the flats without, you know, having the benefit of a housing scholarship is because students can go to financial aid and like take out loans directly for that reason, and like payments can be made towards housing through SLU. So like if you had a scholarship from like outside of SLU that can maybe be applied there, that might work, or like financial aid can be worked out through that payment. Whereas if you just go straight to Coronado, like that's not the same situation. So that's why they decided to do that, because they first saw, you know, this kind of situation, and they thought that this would be a reasonable solution. So there's no way for them to have that, like, transfer a housing scholarship there.
One thing, and I mean, I'm really not a proponent for the housing and res life, like, at all. I feel like they do a really bad job of communicating. But in January, they sent out a really long email, and it said that the scholarships wouldn't apply to the flats. It was a really long email, and I mean, I'm totally not a proponent for their, like, we had to email them, like, multiple times before they even sent it out. But they said, at least, before the housing signups that they wouldn't count, but they didn't advertise it again, I don't think. I think it was only in that one email.
I know we've been talking about it in committee, so we've known about it. So. Okay.
I was just wondering, like, what the response has been from, like, administrators. Like, I know you guys talked to, like, Kent and Scott, but, like, has Alvin said anything, or, like, anyone?
I haven't gotten a hold of Alvin. I sent him an email yesterday while we were discussing what we were going to do today. And it looks like he's out of the office this week. Family conflict?
Yeah, his grandma died.
And also this morning I emailed the assistant directors, and they either have res life night or something, and hall coordinators have class this evening. So that's why I know.
So I guess kind of going like, how did like you, Kent and Scott go?
They had pretty much two things. We wanted to present two things. One was, Brian and I went there really to be a pulse. Like you said, we wanted to provide a forum. Last Saturday, like, too many people were fuming. We needed one spot to concentrate stuff. So we went there really as
student barometer.
Student barometer, so because this is what people are saying. We want to make them cognizant of how we feel. and it was pretty obvious that they were very respectful and wanted to work, and it was very clear that the stuff that we said will help guide housing in the future, in future years, to help reduce these glitches in the system. However, when it came to actually rectifying this year, I did not expect this out of them because we just met with them for an hour. They said the appropriate way, if you want rectification, is to go through SGA, and that's why I'm glad you organized this. And so that's kind of the next step. So they've kind of acknowledged, and with any new implementation of a new system, there's kinks. They appreciate all the feedback, and they want to use those to make it as free as possible in the future. But we're here today with our senators to help find out what do we ask of them now.
Okay. Have you guys looked at like any other housing policies, like in other schools? Because I think BC had a recall last year.
We haven't this year through committee.
Okay. I was just wondering, like, I guess, like, over
That would
like
be
break, especially for you guys.
interesting.
I'm
I know
not
that-
positive, but I think BC last year did housing wrong and had like a redraw.
Yeah.
I'm not positive, so don't mark my words, but.
When I did suggest that, he said that they have, the Board of Trustees passed this sophomore housing requirement, and they can't just, just get rid of it or forget about it. So either they're gonna have to have a Board of Trustees reverse this decision, which was probably gonna be pretty hard to do last minute. They're gonna have to find some other way to do it. And he said that the reason why this, these issues are coming up is because they, with their calculations, miscalculated a lot of stuff in terms of, how many upperclassmen are going to stay, and I think a lot of it is, I know I live in Milwaukee and Marquette has the same policy, and what all the people who live in Milwaukee live within 50 miles of Marquette or whatever it is, what they say is they're living at home, but really they live across the street from campus. I think that little glitch in the system wasn't really recognized yet by the SLU students, the rising sophomores. So I think that they might have looked at maybe Marquette's numbers and see how many people choose to be a commuter by exemption. Because SLU did say you can be exempt from this policy, but I think that because it's so new, people didn't realize it like it's realized at Marquette. So maybe that's what caused some of their miscalculations.
I guess I just wanted to voice my concern too with what she was saying, that I know for a fact that the prices were not given to us until the Friday before the Monday we had to give out, or like say what we were going to do. So that's after the squatting and the pulling in deadline. So how is it that they can expect us to pull in somebody or to squat in a place where they may decide to jump up the apartment prices by $1,000? How do they know, how are we expected to make well-informed decisions when they themselves are not giving us, well-informed information? Well, the flats, no, and
Or just in general.
everything in general. I know for a fact, I have it saved in my computer, I got the timestamps and everything. I can prove that it wasn't posted until that Friday, right? So 4 days before that Monday.
I'm not sure that's something we can look into.
Well, I can send it to you, because like
Okay.
I said, it's on the timestamp.
Also for the squatting stuff, I was in class at the time, and two of my roommates went because we heard that squatting was not an option this year. Yeah. And so two of my roommates went to go ask the guys at Res Life before the sign-up date, like the day before, if that's an option. He said no, so we didn't try for it. We would have, but we live in G, in the village, which is 12 months, so I don't know if we even could have. So just being misinformed about that was just very, very confusing.
Also about the sophomores and miscalculation and stuff, I've heard that there are a lot of sophomores that are in the village that don't even want to be in the village, but when they went into their appointments,
Current sophomores or
going to be sophomores, that are in the village, don't even want to be in the village, but the entire village was opened up to them during their appointments. And not all of Marguerite, not all of Fuse were open up to them. So if there are seniors and juniors that are in Fuse and Marguerite, which should be freshmen and sophomore, I think, because dorms should be like that, and upperclassmen should get apartments, why are there sophomores in the village when they could just easily be flip-flops?
I don't think it was all village. I just think that
there's a fair amount.
What Alvin had told us was that there was going to be, obviously there always is sophomores. There's always a small percentage of sophomores who will be in the village. It happens every year. So he said it's going to be the same thing. But I think what happened was, like, I've talked to freshmen who went in there. There was quite a bit of the village open. It was not just that small percentage open. You know, it was like half of it. So the freshmen who were going in at the beginning, they were not coming out. Majority were not coming out with Fuse or Marguerite. They were coming out with Marquette in the village. And so that's some glitch in the system. I don't know how they would let that happen. And so, you know, those are questions that need to be answered, because I know it was more than Alvin said it was going to be. But if they're res life workers there, I'm just confused on how that could happen. I mean, you know,
especially when he said there wouldn't be upperclassmen, especially seniors, because we brought up in our committee meetings. I said, well, seniors don't want to live in Marguerite or Fuse. I mean, maybe there are some that want to, but you know, that's just not plausible for a senior who's 21, 22. And he's like, no, that wouldn't happen. And then from everyone that I've heard, that's all that they were offered was Fuse and Marguerite.
I mean, we were.
And we're
going to be upperclassmen.
Yeah.
So.
Can I just really quick?
Yeah.
Sorry, not a new comment. If they try to say that, well, there are no upperclassmen in Fuse and Marguerite, because they tried to pull he pulls out his paper and goes, well, there are none. It's because everyone ate the housing scholarship and said, I'm not moving there.
Right.
So I'm sorry, just know that would be a response.
Well, and I think one of the things we should have is, at what point did the village cut off? Like, you can't get the village anymore, and then figure out how many upperclassmen were left with appointments. Because it doesn't matter if they're not signed up for that. That's the only thing they were offered. And we were in the top half of the juniors, and all that was left was Fuse and Marguerite or 12-month contracts, which, as you said, like, some people can't afford if they're from out of town, especially when they're 10,000.
I just have two things. The first thing I want to say, the other thing about the 12-month contract is, I think it's different for people who are in 5-year programs or people who are juniors who might be taking summer school. I understand that's a viable option. For seniors who are graduating in May, the 12-month contract is just not logical. It's just not logical to expect someone to live on on-campus housing when they're already graduated. I don't see the logic in that. I wanted to emphasize that. And the other thing is, and just a general question, does anyone know why the Board of you guys, why the Board of Trustees decided to do the sophomore, to have the sophomores on campus? And the reason I ask that is because it comes from a monetary standpoint. From what I've heard from my friends and just in this forum, they're losing money with the people who are refusing to live in the flats or in other places on campus, or if it's from I know one of the things they say on their website is that living on campus has all these benefits to it in terms of community and things like that, and we all know that Reiner and the flats are removed from campus essentially. So
that's the main point we brought up, is that clearly in Kemper's email when he said that this would have a slight impact, I can send it to you, on the 2010 housing year, or whatever this process was. Yeah, we sent it back in 2008. The issue he said was that national studies show that this increases retention rate, happiness at the school. I'm a proponent of that. I wish I could have had freshman year experience all over again, but you know what? It's all in the same boat, and everybody has community bathrooms. It's fun.
Right.
But the issue is, it does a disservice for twofold. One is because when some fresh rising sophomores get stuck in Reinert, but their peers have the village, is that fair? It's not all in the same boat. And two, if the issue is to support community, anybody who lives in the village or Grand Forest, how much community do you feel with your neighbors? How much interaction do you have with your RAs?
Never met them.
The issue he said is that it increases retention because it prevents falling through the cracks. Well, yeah, if you have a concerned RA, I am all for that. But the issue was they didn't even have a means to support the all sophomore experience community.
Right.
And that's the discrepancy.
Yeah, and I think when I first heard about it, I thought, oh, this is great, because my freshman year, I loved living in Greece, and sophomore year, I lived in Marquette, and it was very difficult the first month because I felt isolated, because there were no communal bathrooms, and there was no reason to walk outside or leave your door open. So I thought, oh, well, this would be great if they make Marguerite and Fuse and maybe one of the Marquette's all sophomore dorms. That would be a community building thing, and obviously that's not what happened.
If this is in fact not a money grab, paraphrasing, is there any discussion of moving the housing scholarship out of the fact that it's a housing scholarship and moving that over into academic tuition?
As far as I've heard, no.
What we would do to...
They built a loophole in, and they said that if there was no more housing, then they would transfer your housing scholarship to your tuition, but the flats were the only thing that was left where your housing scholarship doesn't apply anyways.
Right.
They built the loophole in for themselves so that they wouldn't have to do that, yes.
Then in that case, how do we go about to transfer our housing scholarship to an academic tuition?
That's something we've been
That would be a
fighting for
discussion
a long
that we would
time.
have to have with financial aid and housing.
Okay.
In terms of like proper placement of sophomores, SGA passed that resolution that like Housing and Res Life set a 10% like blanket statement that sophomores or 10% of grades would be reserved for sophomores, and obviously that kind of aroused some emotions. And I was just wondering what the response from Housing and Res Life was to the resolution that SGA passed that called for the elimination of that 10% thing, because obviously that's a really arbitrary number and it's kind of weird to even have that many sophomores in Greece. So I was wondering kind of like what Housing and Res Life was going to do about that, because obviously students were not happy with that.
Right. I haven't, I've discussed it with Alvin. He took it into account, but in the end, Housing and the university, tries to do the best they can for us. I haven't heard anything about Breeze. Any
has he
complaints
mentioned
so far? It's just been about the flats.
Yeah.
So if there is, I'm sure there are.
I was just wondering, like with the housing scholarships, like I called them before to ask them how that would work, and they told me that they would consider releasing them, like moving them over to academic tuition, after they got the word from Housing and Res Life that they were out of spots on campus. But like I know we were talking about this earlier that they thought they had enough spaces, but like honestly, like I sat down with the calculator and there were like obviously not enough spaces on campus. Like there are only 3,500 spaces like that. Like if you count up the number of people who are gonna have to live there, like obviously like there's not enough room. And the problem that that made me really upset was that neither side of like that equation, like financial aid was really rude on the phone when I was talking to them, and then Housing and Res Life was really unhelpful as well. And neither one of them would give any sort of a guarantee. Like Housing and Res Life told me explicitly that if you were not a sophomore, or a rising sophomore, they would not guarantee you a place to live. And you're not going to find out until April if you have somewhere to live. So we went off campus, we found a lease that we could sign on Saturday night if we didn't find on-campus housing. But I know a lot of people didn't do that because they didn't realize that.
We were willing to lose money in either
Right,
place.
we were willing to lose $250 in either place because we didn't know what are we supposed to do if we didn't have somewhere to live. And I'm really unsure why they weren't willing to give some sort of a guarantee or more information about how there obviously wasn't going to be enough spaces.
Well, there isn't enough space.
Right, I know.
There and we at our last meeting we had the numbers. There's approximately 3,500 spaces.
That's what it says online.
And there was about 3,700 people who signed up for housing.
Right, so why didn't they tell financial aid that there wasn't enough spaces?
I can tell you.
I think one of the trends we're seeing is the communication. Bad communication and effective communication is consistent. That's just something that every institution has that you kind of have to deal with. But when students are depending on the institution, they go in and talk to a student worker or an adult worker at these offices. The information that we get should be accurate. I know I've been on the phone with my parents asking them for loans because like you guys, I'm going to lose money regardless if I stay on campus or get off of campus. And every time I talk to my mom, she says, who'd you hear that from? How old did he or she look? Was she wearing a name tag? Did you get it in writing? Did they sign a piece of, because everything that I've heard has been mixed or a little bit of information here, not complete. So I think that's just a theme.
It's more the scholarship thing. I have a housing scholarship, per semester. And if I chose to live on campus all 4 years, I would get that housing scholarship, but I was only offered the flats. And so then my housing scholarship does not apply. I don't think that's fair for them to offer me that money and then not let me use it. I had no option to even use that money for that semester.
Was there at least a single in Marguerite for you?
No.
Nothing?
No. And the other thing is, we're each going abroad one semester next year. So we literally have no idea what we're going to do. She's going to be gone. She's going to be in a different country. She's across, there's an ocean between us. I'm supposed to figure out what to do. I would rather have it set up. I would rather have it set up before I leave than have to worry about it. Especially, I can apply in October, and I probably will, but with this right now, I'm worried about it. My mom was like, are you gonna have somewhere to live next year? I don't even know, so we'll see. Our friends are literally telling us that we can stay on their couches because we don't know. There's literally, we have like very few options right now, and either way we lose money. Like, if we'd known this, if we'd known it was gonna be like this, we had talked about going off campus before, and then like it just seemed to make sense. It just seemed that we would be fine. All we needed to
I thought it would be easier to live on campus.
Haha, we were wrong.
All right, I'm going to try to direct this towards the flats, just because it's new housing, and with any new housing, there's going to be glitches. I don't know if you've talked to Alvin, I don't know who you've talked to, but what was the reasoning for students not knowing what was going on? I mean, a lot of people didn't get the message, a lot of people didn't get the memo. It's obviously not the students' fault there, you know? If 300-400 people don't know that the flats are 12-month lease, they're not going to count for your scholarship. Something's not happening on their end. So, A, what was their communication method? Because, I mean, I didn't know about the 12-month lease for the flats until Alvin told me. And not everyone talks to Alvin, you know. Not everyone knows who Alvin is. So, Alvin's third of that. So I'd like to know, what was their communication method for introducing the flats and specifications of the flats, and then B, why didn't we get that message?
Well, feedback was taken from reservoirs, RHA, and other student input. So I'm guessing student staff for the department. That's what I got from Alvin. But from the general student.
But I'm talking about, I'm sure maybe there was a write-up in the U News. I don't know.
We got half of it. We knew about the scholarship part of it, but we were never told about the 12-month lease part of it.
Okay, so there was a write-up in the U News about it. I mean,
but that was still incomplete information.
Was there any sort of press release? Was there any sort of written statement put on the SLU website? You don't know.
Regardless, it would be late. I mean, it was last minute that they came out.
Okay, I just have one quick question. Kind of one of the main points that Brian and I brought up to Dr. Smith and Porterfield today was that for the juniors in the room. Okay, so rising juniors in the room. So every year, people choose to move off campus and eat their housing scholarship. People like to move to Coronado, but they usually choose to do so their fall semester, shop competitively, and sign a good lease their fall semester. Okay. Now the issue was, did you guys assume, rising juniors, that you would most likely have traditionally junior-appropriate housing available?
Yes.
Okay. So the point I tried to argue was, how can you expect juniors to come to Housing Day when they expect to be living in Grand Forks Marquette, show up, and when they had told their parents the day of that, hey mom, dad, you guys can expect a $7,000 lease, and 2 hours later say, it's 12 grand. That's not an appropriate, and it sounds like they rush you into signing to pressure, you only have till 5 p.m.
Kids, you have literally until day's end to either cancel your contract or lose $3,000.
That's not the appropriate amount of time to make a $5,000 decision, and what's worse is the way it leaves, what it leaves you with. It leaves sophomores with prime choosing of it leaves them with the prime spots because they had open field, and it also accommodated entire sophomore groups. Now when you look at upperclassmen had slim pickings. Now sure, they could still live in the village, but as you said, their groups were not together. Okay, well then say, fine, don't live with us. Well now you're left scrambling for an apartment where there are still only singles available in the other spots around campus. So no large senior groups are accommodated anywhere in Midtown, on campus or off campus. I don't live in Coronado, or is Coronado filled up? Triples, quads?
They were signing some as of today.
No,
I don't
we
think
signed
it
ours
was-
yesterday.
Yeah,
We signed ours Saturday.
Got in?
Yeah.
Thank God.
We got really lucky.
We put 700 down way early.
Are you expecting those to fill up? Because I don't know what the juniors else have to live with their friends.
I mean,
Rising
like,
juniors.
the Coronado will, because Coronado's the most popular, but Lyndall and Moolah will always have a few. I mean, like,
And
it's never going
Milwaukee.
to fill up. Coronado's the main one.
A lot of rising juniors have been, as of like over the weekend and as of and like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, there was no singles left, and I'm not sure about the rest of the units, but there aren't very good options left off campus either.
And my issue also applies to seniors. I know as
as someone who considers themselves responsible, if I would have foreseen this, I would have even bothered with housing and I would have started researching before. My roommate and I scrambled today. I skipped work, she skipped class so we could go to the leasing offices around campus and figure out what our options were and how much money we have to come up with in the next 24 hours.
Yeah, I mean, I would look at the lofts, like the lofts, and then Spring Street lofts, and then PW shoe.
Spring Street lofts is pretty full.
The lofts, really.
Is PW shoe?
Spring Street, they don't have to come in until April to leave.
Oh, yeah.
PW show was like behind the meter a little bit.
But like even this extension.
There's only a few more. No, they're pretty good.
Yeah, I have two things, I guess. A, what I would like to know is, you know, this housing scholarship, it didn't just creep up on us. Like, there was actually a freshman group that got grandfathered in. I guess, what has Housing and Res Life been doing for like that year plus? And making some changes, like, it just seems like this has all happened all within the last, like, 2.5 months. And it just seems like
With the flats?
Everything. You know, nothing was, transparent from the beginning. Like what you're saying, how can, we do this if we don't know, like, in the fall? They had a year plus to make, all these decisions. And so why is it not until like 2.5 months until the deadline that they're making these decisions?
Well,
and then secondly, I guess, I would also like maybe a list of people who did make the decisions. Who are the people who made the decisions to say, okay, well, 50% of Grant Forest available rooms are going to be sophomores, and 50% of the village, or whatever, I don't know the exact facts and figures, but I just want to know who did all this, because when I go down there, I get the runaround. And what it seems like is that people know they made poor decisions, but they don't want to let any of us know because, they know that we're all getting upset at it. So I guess I would like a comprehensive list of who did make all the decisions and how it moved up the grapevine to actually come down to us.
Well, I know that they've been talking about it. They've been discussing this for at least the past year with the, I don't know, not necessarily the flats, but with the residency requirement. They did decide that this year would be the year of implementation. I don't know how much thought they put into it, but I know they were thinking about it and talking about it, and they decided this would be the year. In regards to the list of decision makers, off the top of the list in my head, Housing Res Life, Father Biondi, Board of Directors, PCC, all the way to the chain.
Okay. So I guess there's like no specific names, but I guess
I would go.
Say these are the people who made the decisions that basically.
I would go Alvin Sturdivant, Michelle Vinson, who's the senior housing assignments coordinator. Dr. Porterfield going to vice presidential level.
I think the issue comes in here where they require sophomores to live on campus, but they don't provide that much more housing. And last year there were people who had to go on Manresa because they didn't have enough housing. So I don't understand why they made this decision. They're saying, oh, we have plans to build a new building. That's what he said. And we're going to have an all-sophomore dorm. But you can't make a requirement. I mean, clearly their intentions of having sophomores go before upperclassmen is to kick the upperclassmen off campus.
Or to the
Can I answer to that? When they enacted this freshman sophomore housing policy, it was 2 years ago. It was 08, right? Fall of 08. Were they doing that under the assumption that there was going to be a sophomore dorm in place by the summer of 2010?
I think I can answer that because I was the Marguerite Notre Dame senator that year, and they never really said anything about housing as far as like any new housing. Because I know a lot of people had a lot of rumors about, oh, they're closing Laclede's, they're gonna like open a new dorm and things like that, but they never moved past saying like there'll be housing eventually kind of thing. They never said that like we're gonna lease buildings and things. The flats came up this fall.
There was a discussion about housing. Apparently, it was a contract issue between the developer and who normally does university housing units, where like they would build it and operate it, and the university would pay for it. I guess kind of like the lofts, but like we would operate inside, but they would own it. So and that fell through because of a contract issue going up to PCC, Father Biondi, as far as I know. And they are working on it. I'm not privy to that information.
But
so.
Okay. Well,
it's the President's Coordinating Council. So basically, vice presidents, Biandi, and we do have a seat. President Harris from SGA sits on that.
Can I just finish that?
Oh, sure, sorry.
I was just wondering if we could see why they decided that just because sophomores are required to live on campus, why did they have the privilege of going before other people? So if we could have like a reason and why their decision was, because I think it appears that they knew that they didn't have enough housing, they didn't have a new building coming in. So by kicking sophomore or upperclassmen off campus because they're either like, oh, let's go to Fuse or let's move off campus, they knew that they would move off campus. So if they have some other reason, I mean, like, we should hear it. And also, I think that looking forward to next year, this is going to be, the compression issues are going to be magnified, you know, way bigger. Because you're going to have all these sophomores, rising sophomores, who are going to be rising juniors squatting in the Village, Grand Forest, Marquette, and there's going to be nothing available.
Because they're already mostly sophomores now, or for next year.
Yeah. So something has to happen, like, significantly with this housing requirement, because just switching people around isn't going to work.
My question is, like, what are you doing? Like, what's the process after this meeting? Like, what's going to happen? What are you going to do?
Well, I'm just collecting feedback. I would probably talk with our SGA President Harris on what we should/could do next. I know Dr. Servan, I guess he's out for the week. You know, I guess I could meet with Dr. Porterfield, going one up.
Because there's a level of urgency with like Easter break, and there's a very small time window to resolve things. So.
And I think you need to come up. We need to like work on a list of things that we want changed, what we can do for this year. And, like, we understand that everyone is very pissed off right now, and that's obvious. But we also need solutions too. So like anything that could even come to mind, like making Fuse and Marguerite all sophomore dorms that free up Marquette for upperclassmen, the Village. That could be one thing, either for next year or moving sophomores like that Marquette into that. But I don't know if you can do that with contracts. Stuff like that, stuff that can be done right now. I think we need to come up with a list of that.
Right now it's just a bunch of talk.
Right, but if we have a list of things that we want, that's what we can present to them and say, as students, we expect this of you. We can even pass a resolution and send it. Just stuff like that. It's a lot easier to have something tangible that we want done instead of we're just really mad, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, no, I agree, because I sent an email last week because my housing appointment was at 2:22 on Saturday as a senior, and I was looking at the time and I realized I was like, what's going to be open? That's the last day. There's only 4 hours left. And there's so many people before me. I emailed Alvin and I go, well, I can't afford any of the apartments except for Marquette because it's the cheapest of all of them. And, you know, what are the chances of me getting into the dorm? And he was like, well, there'll be a few left, but the rest of them should be open. There should be, you have a good time for a senior, and there will be spots for the Village and the Flats, and maybe Grand Forest. Yeah. And I was like, well, that's just not going to work for me, so I'm deciding to I'm deciding to squat. And luckily, he listened.
And that's good that you got that information, not in a timely manner, but before you had to
Yeah,
make a
I feel
decision.
that information wasn't shared with anyone. If they had shared that before, I think a lot of people maybe would have moved off campus or, you know, would have decided to do something else.
That's another thing. When my roommates also went to go talk and when they told that he was flat, the guy that was working had an appointment after our time. We were at 2:07. This was after ours. He wasn't even worried about it because what he had been told was like, it's not going to be a big deal. There's enough room open. You'll have your chance. And then luckily we went down there Friday afternoon or about 1 o'clock to see what was all full, what was being taken. The guy that we talked to told us or advised us to go right now to look off campus at housing. So we
Is that someone there?
Yeah, I don't remember. But there was no one else to talk to, no one was answering our questions, so we pretty much booked it to the loss because at least then we could get out of a 3-day contract while in the hour that we were there, 3 people signed contracts there like on the spot because no other housing, and because they were also advised, like, so thank God, like, he told us that because we would be in the same boat as half the people without any housing. So at least now we have a spot, but I'd like that $2,000 scholarship to go to it.
So what happens if you went off campus now, but originally you put the $250 down payment for the housing contract? So what happens to that?
We went to our appointment on Saturday, and at that appointment time, we just canceled it. There was one, I think, apartment in the village still available, so we were going to try and get that. But while we were in the room, it got taken, so we went straight to cancel it, and luckily got the money back.
Does anyone know what happens to that if you didn't cancel? Yeah, anyone? They take it. That's what we were doing.
It's a non-refundable.
Yeah. And I think you're bound by the housing contract. If you didn't tell them by I mean, I know that changed with the locks, but what they told me was that if I didn't tell them before the end of housing appointments on Saturday night, then I was bound by the contract.
Okay,
like I couldn't get out of it unless I was on the waiting list and they couldn't find space for me.
Right.
So I would have to wait till the summer to
And that's what I understood to be true. Today, like I said, I got that email about an hour ago. I went to Housing and Res Life and said, what does this mean? It says you can get out of your addendum contract with the flats, but that doesn't mean that you're getting out of your other contract with SLU Housing. And I think I understand that, but then I said, what happens to my $250? So she said it just goes back onto your tuition, it's a credit to your bill, which I still think is misinformation, or at least not complete information. Because it makes sense that it's a non-refundable deposit, that makes sense.
I think that whoever in the corner commented that we need to start coming up with our list of demands. And I think that one of the things that we should be saying is that Res Life knew exactly how many sophomores were signing up for housing. They knew exactly how many upperclassmen were signing up for housing. And they knew exactly how many beds were on campus. The process that they went through, I think that people feel was incorrect. Putting aside housing in the village and Grand Forest and Marquette for sophomores and leaving the rest for the upperclassmen is not what we feel should have happened. What should have happened is a certain amount of upperclassmen should have been allowed to sign up for the housing they wanted first. The rule stood that the sophomores were guaranteed housing. Res Life should have known where that cutoff place was. They should have known exactly how many people. For instance, like I don't know the numbers exactly, but maybe only 500 beds were available for upperclassmen. They should have stopped housing signups then. They could have even informed people who were on the housing list past that 500 mark that they were not guaranteed housing unless somebody above them did not get their housing appointment. Then, whatever was left on campus should have been given to the freshmen and sophomores.
To accommodate all of them.
Yes, they could have all gotten their housing. But it should have given first choice to the seniors and juniors.
The one excuse they told me, because I went down to their office at least 3 times to discuss or whatever, and their big excuse is that, well, we don't know the exact numbers because we don't know how many people are transferring or are moving away from the SLU community. And I told them, which I think we could also say, is that you can't tell me that being a university since, what, 18, like they always say, that we don't know typical numbers of how many people move. Because what you could do is double that number. It's not going to be anything well over 150 students.
Keep a floor open. It would have been
Exactly. You can find a reasonable number that you can be 99% confident that.
You know what? Don't give those students who don't commit right away and haven't transferred, are they guaranteed housing?
The people who decide to transfer.
So I'm just starting a list of the things that we want.
Yeah, I'm taking it.
The sophomores who are forced to live in the Greece complex are already being forced to live triple to a room, and in Greece they're going to live 4 to a room in most cases. But in Greece, 3 to a room.
Rising sophomores?
Yes, like I have to live in Walsh next year, and I have a triple.
Is that a double?
Yeah, it's a double that's turned into a triple. So, and I asked them, my plan was Friday night. I have a higher GPA than half the kids that went before me.
which is completely unfair in a different respect. But when I went, I was like, Greece had already been filled, so I was like, well, what are my options? They're like, well, what room in Walsh do you want? I was like, well, I guess I'll pick this one. And I was like, well, what are you going to do when the rest fill up? They're like, well, we'll just add a floor. And I was like, well, what about the freshmen? They're like, well, we don't know yet. So they knew when we all enrolled last May that we were all going to have to live on campus. So I'm upset about the fact that I have to live in Greece again, which is fine if 95% of my other peers weren't living in apartments who also don't have a high GPA. Just because they're rooming with people that have a 4.0 who are, I don't know, different majors, doesn't mean that they should get to live in the village.
When you went to your appointment on Friday night, what was open? Was the village open yet? Was
the village was done, Marquette was done, Fuse was
done. Meaning full or
yeah,
not open?
no,
Fuse.
I walked in and they asked me which room in Walsh that I want, and I was like, well, I mean, I'll take this one.
Okay,
there was no option.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding. It's not that at that point those buildings were full. It was just whatever had been opened up to you guys.
The sophomores had filled everything by, all the apartments were gone by 4 p.m. Friday.
Oh, they were cut off. There was a thing on the housing, like right above where the housing was, where it says that no more apartments will be given to sophomores after 4 p.m. on Friday. I was like, so.
The other problem is the sophomores who had housing appointments Saturday morning, there was no housing left in Greece that was blocked off. So they got to fill in y'all's upperclassmen spots, which is completely unfair to me because I had an appointment before then.
Right. Really?
Well, I'll let you start first. Okay, so we talk about proactive things. So one of the things that seems like, just what you're going after saying, there are some sophomores who want, like, here's a case study. Brian Kelly here. Got assigned Marquette.
I live in Grand Forest right now.
Grand Forest, got assigned Marquette. He knows some rising sophomore, people are going to be sophomores, that wanted Marquette, but because it was blocked off for us upperclassmen, took Grand Forest. And so it would make sense, at the very least, it might only affect maybe 20, 30 people, that'd be 20, 30 people happier as there are now, maybe a housing swap. Somehow develop a forum and say, did you get the one you wanted? How many people do you have? And they can match, like an organ donor does. If you find somebody that matches, just switch them.
That's true.
Because at the very least, we already know of one example where 3 in Grand Forest can switch to be with their friends in Marquette, and Brian and Marquette can switch and be my neighbor.
Different to that proposal, I think that it was just a big miscalculation, and this is a big mistake, and I think that although that might improve the situation, I think that something bigger than that is needed to call for. Like, you cannot have that many people living in rooms in the dorms. Like, I don't know what the freshmen are going to do if they already have sophomores in there. And another issue is, like, you have seniors sharing bedrooms in Grand Forest with a sophomore who has a single bedroom, and seniors are split up from groups. Everything is just a mess. Everyone's splattered all over campus trying to fill little beds wherever they could. I think that just swapping is just going to create this relay web, and it's just going to be way too complicated. I personally think the easiest way to do this is say, upperclassmen, if you want to stay where you're at right now with your contract, we'll let you do that. Everyone else who wants to redo housing, we'll just redo housing, do it the way we used to, and then just somehow find a way to get rid of this sophomore year requirement, put it on hold until they actually build housing that can accommodate this. Because if you're having a housing crunch last year, and then they add the sophomore requirement, it's just not feasible, and it's just not going to work. And I can't imagine what they're going to do with freshmen. So I don't think that little switches are going to do justice for this kind of situation.
I have a question about numbers and like the dorm rooms. So Fuse, Marguerite.
I don't have the numbers in front of me.
I was just curious, like how many underclassmen were put into those.
Oh, I don't know.
And then,
I haven't seen the housing.
Great Force, I know, 50-50 split. Mine, like, if you take away athletes, and that's what somebody was talking about. I know for a fact, she told me Grand Force is a 50-50 split.
I don't know how many rooms are in the actual dorms, but why didn't they just make those for the sophomores? Maybe leave a floor for upperclassmen if they choose to like live in dorms. But why? I'm just curious about numbers.
I guess I can get the numbers and put them with the administrator list.
I guess I didn't go through the housing process. I'm a graduating senior, so I'm on my way out. But I guess my question is just kind of like in terms of what Mike was sitting next to you, Brian. In terms of kind of what Brian said, in terms of like kind of almost like a redo idea. Like, just is there any part of the result of the housing process that actually worked? Like, is it something that swaps can fix, or is it just that the whole thing is so messed up that people feel like that? Like, honestly, like, is it a feeling like, do most people feel like that was a complete waste and we should start over, or do people feel like we can swap this around and do a bunch of stuff and make it work?
Let's say start over. For things that we should start all over.
Like, put your hand up.
Well, I know.
I'm not living here either, but
Yeah,
I think it's a good idea.
They're the ones that
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a vote like this is good for our room, not to interrupt anyone, but like you need to do campus-wide. Like this is just a really small portion of the population who are upset.
Well, before doing a recall, I think we need to look at the inputs in this system because there's like a computer system that's used to do this. So we need to see what the actual inputs were that determined this lot, like these allocations. Right?
What about the surveys?
Well, like the surveys, but like when you fill out all of your things, like the computer's ranking everything and assigning you based on certain things. So like that is manually entered by humans. You know what I mean? Like they're assigning the priority. So we need to figure out from the, like what were those, right?
Like, the system's done by like a computer.
Are you talking about like
The housing system?
Like your appointment.
So if it's so skewed and like kind of everyone feels like it's messed up, maybe there was a glitch in the system. But really, like everyone has all these unanswered questions. It really could come from looking at the data and how it was entered.
So like Housing and Res Life is saying like, like your semesters on campus.
We were not well informed about what was going to happen.
So like the options for like sophomores.
How they reserved spots for sophomores. Like we were all aware that sophomores were guaranteed housing, but it was never made clear to us how that they were guaranteed housing in the village and Mercedes and all these other places.
Dave, I think something truly very tangible that we can ask for. I don't think that much, but it might help. I think a lot of the disdain comes from people who anticipated being able to use a housing scholarship, being the kind of maybe our fault for being naive, assuming the status quo would remain the same. But I think it's fair to say that rising juniors assume they can use their housing scholarship to buy university housing. Okay. Again, every year people move off campus, lose a housing scholarship, but it's their choice and they have time to plan for it and competitively shop. So I think a very tangible solution would be that anybody who is in the flats, granted, we can't offer anybody who lives in the flats a housing scholarship because it's not SLU eligible, but I think a tangible solution would be to offer them something that is tuition-based for the same amount if they're living in the flats, based upon the assumption that I'm willing to bet no one who's in the flats went to housing saying, I'm living in the flats, because they would have signed the lease before SLU took it over.
Right.
So every one of those people wanted to use that. It wasn't their choice to move there. And I think it's very tangible to ask for the $1,000 for the 50 students. Like, it's good press release, maybe it only affects 50 people, but it's something.
I just want to make a point about this idea that time is of the essence. I know that we have to sign a lease by tomorrow with the lofts, unless we're banking on getting housing here. So I want to know, David, how realistic do you think this is? Like, I mean, obviously, I'm not like a person who's going to cross my fingers and just go with the wind, but how realistic is it that this is going to change, in your estimation?
Personally, from my experience, not very likely for this coming year.
That's what I think.
I may be wrong. I don't
No,
know.
I appreciate
I don't
that.
have all the answers. So.
The one thing, I think it would be great if they could, help the students living in the lofts with, housing scholarships and stuff. But, a lot of that, or in the flats, sorry, yeah, in the flats. But, I know for us, the flats are a lot more money than off-campus apartments, even, without scholarships. And, I anticipated that housing was going to be all messed up. So I arranged to sign a lease on Saturday night if there wasn't any housing available except the lofts because it was cheaper. But, I'm still not going to get my housing scholarship. And I don't necessarily understand why they can't, I don't know where that money goes if they don't give it to the students. Do they funnel it back in to give to more freshmen? Or, where does that $2,000 each year go? They said that it was merit-based when we came here, and then there was an article in the U News a couple months ago where SGA asked, I think, Kent Porterfield, like why they didn't like transfer them, and he said that it was like not merit based. But I don't necessarily understand like why they don't think it's merit based if like they gave it a merit based scholarship.
I was at that meeting, and it was actually Kent Porterfield and Father Beyond, and they said that they don't want to give people that $2,000 to go off campus because they don't want to reward people for moving off campus. But it's ridiculous if you don't have
But like
space.
we had to go off campus in order to afford it. Like I mean, the difference between living in like the Coronado or the Lofts and living in the flats is thousands of dollars. You know what I mean? And like no one knew that they were going to do anything to fix it. So what were we supposed to do? Like hope that they would help us out when they haven't been demonstrating that at all so far.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to the scholarship thing as I'm academic vice president this year, and I've been pushing for them to transfer that money to tuition for a long time, and I don't understand. They've given me terrible explanations, just awful explanations. I'm just being very blunt here. And we really should continue to push for this, especially in this situation. Because it's such an emergency, it affects students who are a lot worse off than the university, I'm sorry, directly, economically, a great deal. I really think we can make it happen. One of the terrible excuses I've gotten is that it's too hard to track. Like it's really, you can't use, we need to be pissed about this. Like we need to make it clear, no, it's your job, you're getting paid. I'm paying you directly, track it, learn how to use Excel, whatever you have to do. You can do it, and I really think that we should make that, especially in this situation, if not just now and never again, move those scholarships to tuition, because it just makes sense to do. And and I've talked to them about where the money comes from, where it has to go. It does seem to fit in. Like it can work, it can be done. There's no law, there's no donor saying, no, I don't want them to use it for tuition. It's only for housing, like none of that. So I think we should add this as like kind of maybe the top thing, like get housing scholarships moved into tuition. That way it fixes everybody's problem. I mean, not the entire problem, at least that part of it.
Other than the things that Caitlin has mentioned, that Mike has mentioned, does anyone else have any really concrete things? Because I think my issues mood now. Like it's not going to change. I've kind of been forced off campus. But does anyone else have a situation where they have a few days where they can wait and they have a really good idea for how they can at least help themselves or help some of their peers in terms of suggestions that David hopefully can make to the faculty?
I do have one. There's so every year students won't come back, and there are going to be spots open to reassign. I don't know if there's a criteria for who gets first on reassignment. If it's first come, first serve, I say give it to upperclassmen.
I think that's
Seniority first. Get the seniors, give them first pick. Because if they don't, I'm afraid it'll be open season. Whoever happens to check their email or walk in the office will be able to pick it. So I say seniors first on all reassignments. Work the way down the list.
They might have to decrease the room size first.
Mm-hmm.
Logistically, if they did, I'm not positive if they triple packed the rooms and walls, but they might have to.
But all I'm saying is that the meeting I had with the vice president today, every year, like Eric said, there are statistics they plan for it. There are people, rooms are going to open up and they reassign. So I would say, however they reassign, upperclassmen.
Can I add something to that? I don't want to play devil's advocate, but if you're going to do it, first come, first served to all upperclassmen, and let's say all upperclassmen fill those rooms, and what happens when you have those freshmen, those stragglers, those mixed bag of freshmen who are coming in from other states? You don't have anywhere for them to live. So that's the other option. What's that?
Would there not be a reassignment then? If they, because aren't they going to take
I see where you're coming from. I see where you're
there's two so we all know that when started this year, they took all the students who couldn't complain, the Asian students, and put them in Manresa. Okay, so they really did. It's a complete adjustment. The people who are already here and can't complain, they put them all in Manresa. But by Thanksgiving, they had them back here on campus because that many students went home. So it took time. Freshmen, I believe, this is worth for you. I don't know if there's two separate waiting lists, one for the freshmen to actually get them all in the freshman dorms. I do know there is already a wait list for current students, not incoming freshmen.
Because I know that there were incoming freshmen from this past year that weren't just placed in all freshman housing. They were in Marquette, they were in Grand Forest, they were in BMAC. So I don't know if there's two lists, one for freshmen and one for everyone else. I don't think there is. And that's, like, I completely agree that the upperclassmen should get first pick. But from another standpoint, if you have freshmen coming in from other states and they're coming here and they have all their stuff, and or we don't even tell them, or if they're told beforehand, well, we don't have anywhere for you to live right now in July or August. How does that look for, look at for us at the university? At least with the upperclassmen, if they don't have a place to live, they have the means to know the surrounding area. And it's unfortunate, it's absolutely unfortunate that they will lose their housing scholarship and they can't live on campus, but at least they have the means to know that the area and where they can.
But that's Res Life's job to make sure that doesn't happen.
Somebody, I don't know if we want to ask upperclassmen to live in it, ask Alan Sturdivant to live in it for a week with his coworkers. I don't know, just to see how it all, honestly, to see if it all fits. Because sure, freshman housing is fine if you're all in the same boat, I get that argument.
Well, don't even ask them to live in it, but just try to fit in the
Just see if it all fits. I'm just curious. Just see if it all fits. But that can, just ask, you were an RA, weren't you, Caitlin?
Still am.
Just try it, I'm just curious.
I think that would be a great recruitment.
I was just gonna say that I think our biggest argument should be for the housing scholarship because, like I stated before, I was guaranteed it. Like Merit Base obviously is always getting great stuff, but I get it every single year. So, if I want to live on campus, but I'm not allowed to, or there's no room for me, why am I not getting $1,000 back? Like, why did you award to me? And like, my brother got into SLU, and they gave me that scholarship too. And my mom called today and said, well, how do I know you're going to actually honor that scholarship for him if you're not even doing it for my daughter who's already there? So I think that we really need to argue that because that's money that we deserve, that we earned before, that we should be getting every single year if we want it.
I also think that, I don't know how you go about doing this, that the administration needs to rethink this whole mandatory freshman, sophomore living on campus policy until they have the proper means to house everyone who signs up for their projected forecast of how many students. They need to have the proper means. And whether that would be buying another apartment building or building a dormitory, which I guess they were talking about doing, or there's rumors, there needs to be a set plan. Hey, we're going to have mandatory housing freshman, sophomore in X year because we're going to have X building built. So there needs to be something set in place. I don't know how it worked. I don't know. I do, but I don't. Like, I know certain things and I don't know certain things. It sounded like we were under the assumption, at least, that there was going to be another dorm when this was brought up, and there isn't. So they need to have a better plan in place and maybe retract this whole mandatory living on campus.
Just one point that you need to make sure with that is they're going to talk about the flats and say that there is extra housing. So you just need to make sure that that they provide housing that includes the scholarship. So I guess it does always just come back to the scholarship.
And I also think too, it's important about forecasting how many people are going to sign up for housing. Yeah, they include the flats, but it still might not cover the amount of beds. And they can't. You have people will move off campus. If they have to choose, they will. But you can't necessarily forecast or estimate how many they were thinking or estimate it at all. I think you need to have. If 3,700 people signed up for housing, you need to have 3,700 spots. I think it's as simple as that. You can't do that. You can't do that.
Since we've already kind of made up a list of things that could be good for this year, I think one of the things that we should also talk about is something that maybe won't apply for this year, but maybe for next year it'll make it better. I think the idea that whether they build a new dorm or not, I think they should have a more structured plan. Like when we were freshmen and we went to that summer program, we knew that we were going to live in a freshman dorm. Like perhaps they should make sophomore dorms. Maybe not even Marquette or either the Marquette Towers, but make Fuse and Marguerite sophomore dorms. And DMAT is usually mostly sophomores, so that it still keeps up their idea that this is a community and this is how we're trying to structure this so that you guys can live near each other, but you're still a community, it's still dorm-like living, and it keeps everyone on the same playing field. And I just think that something more structured, instead of just saying you guys can pick first and you can pick from whatever you want, perhaps it would have been better if they would have said these are your options and it's limited. And I think in that instance, juniors and seniors would have been happier also with their selection.
I completely agree with that. Like, if freshmen are forced to live on dorms, we go in, we pick our top, 4 or 5 choices, we pick our meal plan, and then we're assigned housing. If sophomores are required to live on campus, then why not do the same lottery system? Why have a free-for-all with a system that obviously doesn't work, and they should just assign us housing based on whatever system they use when we're freshmen?
And one thing I think I like the idea from the meeting today, it was expressed that there is a need for a sophomore dorm, and I just don't want to resort our argument to, well, you guys should have built one. They need one, and they're looking to build one. It just takes time to build. So we got to ask now. And so I forget whose argument it was over there, but I'm trying to think of next year. There's not going to be a dorm next year.
Yeah.
So that argument, the thing that made the most sense to me was they know from statistics, incoming freshman, incoming sophomore class, probably 200. They know total bed number of beds on campus, subtract that number, and then decide from that remaining number of beds on campus, notify us of that availability, because none of us were told how much was going to be left. I don't think a lot of us are mad that, because like I said, people every year choose to lose their housing scholarship. We do without it. It's the fact that we didn't have a choice to not take it. We didn't have a choice to look elsewhere. And I think that's the issue. It's the fact that better information and actually knowing how many spots are actually available so we can choose to look.
Counted on the list and see. They knew exactly who was signing up.
And we all did it. All of us, so many people did the math. Everyone said, I did the Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
They're the only ones who didn't. I'm telling you. Like, they, honest to God, should have emailed juniors. Based on our criteria, they should have emailed the junior class and said, please show up to your housing appointment if you accept, knowing that the only available spots would be singles in residence halls or the flats.
Did all the seniors though? I'm just
There was a certain point on the list. There was a point on the list where everybody passed the list.
They
Should have been
knew
notified.
that would have only been left over.
Right.
Just based strictly on the numbers. So just all we could just ask for is, at the very least, better information in the process to let put the cards in our hands to make the decision, not to be forced in 5 minutes to say, sorry, you can't get your $6,000 lease. Here's the $12,000 one.
And then scramble and
And
try to figure out
exactly.
what else your other options are.
I think that's a reasonable request.
Agreed.
Along with forcing the juniors and seniors to live off campus, if they live far enough away from campus, because housing so close to campus is already getting full, they're going to have cars, they're going to have spaces, which is more money out of their pocket and less spaces for other people. Like, it's going to create just a cascade of events that's not even fair at all in any way. This is a private institution. We don't have to come here, but we're paying money because we expect that level from SLU.
Another suggestion for administration to think about next year, I think it's been brought up, but very clearly said, is that the housing requirement for sophomores. Have they considered just a guarantee of housing for sophomores who want to live on campus? I think it accomplishes the same means. It keeps the sophomores from being kicked off campus when they don't want to, which it was a problem. The sophomores were being kicked off at a young age when they wanted to live on campus. Why, instead of a forceful live on campus, why not a guarantee of housing for sophomores if they want it?
Does anyone have anything else?
Thanks to everyone for coming.
I kind of have a question actually. In terms of the flats, do we know how many spaces there still are in the flats?
I'm not sure.
They started with
Many
267 beds.
I was saying, because they started with a ton, right?
Yeah, the whole list, I'm thinking it's over 100. It's over 100.
And that will change by 5 o'clock tomorrow after people have gotten out of that addendum.
Yeah.
It'll be a class I need.
I guess because my question is like, the flats are just, they're not competitive with on-campus apartments because you can't keep your scholarship, but they're not competitive with off-campus apartments because they're drastically more expensive. So the flats are basically like this black hole that no one would want to live in for any reason because it's more expensive than off-campus, even if you lose, because you're going to lose your scholarship either way, and you can't get anything else on campus. So I feel like the most practical solution in terms of, if there are people who are being pitched out currently, if they, whether it's a pricing change or whatever it is, but there's a bunch of empty beds, presumably, in the flats right now because there's no reason to choose to live there. You should go off campus if that's your only place you can live on campus right now, pricing-wise. So the shortest term solution might be, I mean, literally by noon tomorrow, they could just say, wait a second, why would anyone ever choose to live here based on the current pricing and need to slash the pricing to at least compete with the off-campus housing that it's basically equivalent to? Because it doesn't make sense to me that we're going to potentially end up with like hundreds of empty beds in the flats just because they're priced out of competing with anything. I mean, and that's something that, you know, snapping the fingers tomorrow, boom, it's a new price and people can actually afford to live there maybe.
And economically it makes sense because maybe the university's not profiting on them, but for the leasing company, but at least they're getting something better than nothing.
Yeah, I mean, because they're going to end up with hundreds of empty beds at this point because there's absolutely no economic reason to choose to live in the flats. I mean, the lofts, Coronado, everything's cheaper.
They will. They'll put the freshmen there. I doubt they will end up with empty beds. I don't think they'll end up with empty beds. But I mean, it's a good point, and we should fight it.
Financial aid said today that students who chose to live in the flats rather than being put on the waiting list will not be transferred the housing scholarship and academic scholarship. They say that since you chose to live in the flats rather than being put on the waiting list, that you are making a decision to live there and that you were not forced to move off campus. That's their whole argument.
Yeah, thanks.
I think it's good.
Thank you everyone for being so great.
Yeah, thank you.